1963 Impala SS convertible restoration, part 14. Okay, in the last video, I had mentioned that I had found a reproduction of the reinforcement that goes under the rocker on a convertible. Yeah, the originals were pretty bad. Well, I've got good news. If you're looking for these are a very good quality, high quality reproduction. And I've set them side by side so we can kind of take a look. Now, these are really accurate and really faithful to the originals. Yeah, usually any type of reproduction part, you can usually count on having to do something to it, or it's not really a true reproduction or an accurate reproduction. These are. Okay, let's go. We are installing the right-hand quarter panel. Step number one, we're going to get it up there. Now, in the last video, I had completed a rough cut that went along the top edge because they don't make a aftermarket quarter panel for convertibles. So we have to modify a hardtop or coupe quarter panel. Okay, let's see what we have. Okay, we were careful not to cut off too much. Now, what I'm not going to show in the video is I'll have this quarter panel on and off probably 4 or 5 times, cutting, trimming, refining, getting it closer to where I need it to be. And we definitely don't want to cut too much off right off the bat. Okay, so the gaps, well, those aren't too bad. The body lines, except for that one, you can see the quarter panel has a much wider line than the door. They're both aftermarket parts. We'll deal with that later. We're going to start cutting this quarter down to get it to fit. And we are going to slide it underneath and overlap that top. And our white mark from the soapstone lets us know where that falls. And we always want to try to make nice straight cuts. That's why we're using tape. And then we're always going to use our little hash marks or arrows, directional arrows. We just always want to be in a good habit of cutting the right side of the tape. Okay, let's get that trimmed down. So before we install this again, I'm going to go ahead and put our punch holes, and those are going to be for plug wells. That's what's going to be attaching this edge and the other leading edge of the quarter panels to the body. We'll just go ahead and install those now. This may save us a step because once it's finally on the quarter panel, if these are already installed, then we may not have to pull it back off. That'll save a step. I always try to think ahead. Okay, so like I mentioned, we are going to slide this under. Now this would be where most body shops would just go ahead and call it a day, either lap it over or under, weld it. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to metal finish that area. Nothing wrong with body filler if it's used correctly, but I always like to metal finish if possible. And most of the time, if you do the metal work, well, all the time, if you do the metal work correctly, on the front end, yes, you're going to use a little bit more time and labor, but when I'm finished with this, this will only need a heavy coat of primer, a couple of coats of primer, blocked out, and it's good to go. Now, if we just lap this, weld it, the usual is to lap it like this, start welding it, and if there's any problems, well, you just start caving it in with a hammer wherever it's high, and fill it with body filler. Yeah, that's not what we're doing. Okay, so I get asked about door gaps a lot. Now, this is a rough door gap. So instead of saying, well, yeah, about this much, let's go out and find out what a standard is. Okay, so I'm going to be using my Suburban here. And we have a caliper. So we're going to know exactly. No guesswork. I don't like guesswork. Okay, so we've got 13/64 of an inch gap on the hood to fender. Now we're going to go to the actual door gap. Yeah, it's about 108 degrees out here. Barely see anything. Well, we've got 11/64. And this is the actual width of a paint stick. 15/64. Okay, so I've got this where I think it should go for gap wise. This happens on every Impala quarter I've put on. Nice gap, nice gap, nice gap, no gap overlap. That's about where it starts. One thing you have to understand about aftermarket body parts, they all need work. You will hardly ever be able to just install it and all the gaps are good. There's not body damage from transport or in the factory. That's just part of life. So we'll deal with that part later. Right now, we're going to anchor this back edge because I like where that gap is, even though we have to do some more work. And we are going to address the front edge, leading edge of the quarter panel. Now, this is the best way I've found to prep parts that I'm getting ready to weld. Now, there's still weld-through primer on the back side of this quarter panel, and we have already prepped that door jamb in the previous video. So we're going to be able to get a really nice weld by doing this little media blast out of the spot blaster. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to prep this as opposed to grinding off the backside. Cut that little nib off right there and you're going to get a much better weld. Just a little tip. Okay, now we're going to plug weld this leading edge. Try to get the welds as flat as possible. Doing the prepper work correctly will really help that because we're going to be dressing this down and we want to metal finish this also, where all we have to do is prime it and then block it and we're good to go. If you do good work on the front end of a project, you can save a lot of time and money and material on the back end, and you'll get a much better job. So here we go, dressing it down. We're going to start with the grinding wheel. And we do not want to gouge or make a trough in the metal. We want to stop short of going below flush. There's a shot of that. Step one. Okay, now we're coming back with a flap wheel. I think that's probably 60 grit. And we never want to take off too much metal. That's a big deal when I see guys trying to metal finish or make things too nice. Yeah, don't remove too much metal. That's the whole trick. Otherwise, it's going to crack later. And yeah, it'll all go downhill. So you can see how lightly I'm touching it, not bearing down on it. Okay, so we've switched to another flap wheel. Now this is a little bit finer grit. It's probably 120. Man, it's looking really nice. We could probably stop there, but we're going to go ahead and use our little mini DA, and that'll blend it in even more. So when we hit it with the primer, really nice coat of high build primer filler. Yeah, there's not going to be any body filler or anything like that there. We can come right over that. When it's prepped with the seam sealer, we're good to go. Okay, that's the size that you want to use. That's the thinnest available. We want to make a very thin, precise cut, because we're going to be welding these body panels together. And you want to do this on the vehicle, or have the parts sandwiched together. This has a slight overlap. That gap is going to be very critical in the outcome, how we're able to finish this out. Now we just want to mate this. We don't want to push and then weld it, otherwise it's going to sink, and then we'll be using a bunch of body filler. And we also don't want to put too hot of a weld on this. We just want to barely hit this thing, just get just enough tack to hold it. Now we'll come back, we'll use some more penetrating welds once the entire length has been tacked together and it's mated correctly. We want both panels to be flush. And this is how you accomplish this. We do a little bit, then we do a little bit more. We don't want to cut that whole length. That would be a nightmare. And so now you can see this brass puck that I'm using as a backing fits that shape or that contour, and that'll help us get a nice flush panel, and then we can weld it. Okay, so now we're dressing this down. Everything is looking really nice. Everything's going our way for the moment. And another part about welding, you don't want to just take off. You want to constantly check that things aren't getting out of hand. Because what will happen is when you weld, it puts heat into the panel, and especially thin metal, it'll start moving around when it heats. When it heats up, it starts it'll either shrink or contract. Well, it heats up, it will expand, but then when it cools, it contracts. And if you do that too rapidly in a wrong direction, yeah, that'll cause you a lot of problems. Not being in a hurry. Okay, hey, this thing's really shaping up. So we are dressing down the weld, refining it, not taking off too much. And so now we are finishing it off with some 36 grit. Now you may see a few little divots or things like that, but the primer filler will take care of that. I don't think we're going to need body filler for this joint. Nice job. Happy with that. Stay tuned for part 15. This one's for you, Milton. Hit that like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.